What is up, bros and broettes? I'm Inkslasher, and today we are going to be answering the question, how good is the NX ShadowClaw? Now, the NX ShadowClaw is a DLC kind of crossbow looking thing that some people actually say is overpowered, and throughout this video we are going to come to a decision whether or not this weapon is actually overpowered. Now, throughout last night's stream, I was streaming and a lot of subscribers hopped by and we were talking about whether this weapon was overpowered, how good it was, the best way to use it, and we have come up with the best way to use this weapon, which we're going to talk about at the end of the video. First, you gotta understand how this weapon works, what the stats are, and then we can talk about the best way to use it. So, without further ado, let's get into it and talk about the stats for this weapon. So first things first, what is this weapon? How does it work? Well, it's a semi-automatic crossbow, so it's self-reloading and you can just kind of fire bolt after bolt after bolt. In fact, the best way to look at this weapon isn't actually a crossbow. The way you should look at it is more like a semi-automatic ballistic knife. One where you don't have to reload after every time, you can just keep pulling that trigger and a ballistic knife will keep shooting out of this thing. That's the way I view this weapon, and it kind of really helps when determining the best case scenario when using it. Now, on top of that, another couple things you may want to know is there's only 3 attachments for this weapon: the tri-bolt, the bayonet, and finally a Kimbo, aka dual wielding. So with this, every single attachment completely changes the way this weapon operates. And at the end of this video, when we're talking about the best class setup for this weapon, we're going to be talking about all 3 of these attachments because, like I said, this gun is completely different with every single one of them. Now, the one stat with this weapon that's actually not a number is the fact that with this weapon, you actually never appear on the radar. When you fire this weapon, you stay off the radar. It's like having a built-in silencer in this weapon. However, when you fire this weapon, it is noisy as all hell. In fact, we were joking around at work today saying that if you use this weapon akimbo, you get a whole team of people just firing this thing akimbo. You just won't be able to hear anyone's footsteps because it fires that freaking loud. It's this like little high-pitched whistling noise every single time you fire a bolt. And if you're firing with akimbo and you have a full team of it, it would just be absolutely insane and deafening, like how loud this thing is. So, but let's go ahead and look at the actual numbered stats. So as far as the damage profile goes, this thing is always going to be a one-hit kill no matter what. It deals 200 damage, so it could kill 2 people with one thing, but it can't because it doesn't like penetrate or anything like that. So 200 damage. Now the magic thing about this is it goes through kinetic armor, so if you see someone with kinetic armor, one shot from the NX ShadowClaw will kill them. But more importantly, Raps drones go down with 1 bolt from the NX ShadowClaw. So with 1 clip from the NX ShadowClaw, you could take out 6 Raps drones, which is absolutely insane and a very, very easy way to get easy points when playing multiplayer. So there's a huge tip for you guys there. So a ton of damage. Now, it gets even more crazy when looking at the fire rate. The fire rate for this thing is 200 RPM, which seems like crap. It seems like a really, really bad fire rate, until you consider that this thing is always a one-hit kill. When we look at sniper rifles and shotguns, the only weapons that actually have a better fire rate are the Draken and the Haymaker, both of which you're almost never going to get a one-hit kill, except for the Draken with a headshot, I know, but almost never. You have to do something special, like get a headshot, whereas the ShadowClaw almost has as good fire rate as them, but is always, every single time you can shoot them in the baby toe, it's going to be a one-hit kill, which when combined, those 2 things are even more amazing. And in fact, when using the akimbo attachment on the NX ShadowClaw, it's more like you're actually going to be firing at 400 RPM, which is just mind-boggling when you consider that this thing is a one-hit kill. So as far as other stats go, there is very, very few for us to look at. First of all, aim down sights time. Aim down sights time is next to pointless to tell you, but it's 0.2 seconds. But the reason why it's pointless is you should never, ever, ever aim down sights with this weapon. All it does is take up your time. Simply, the hip spread, which is actually nothing, is easier to use than the iron sights on this weapon anyway. Even if you put like an ELO on this thing, there's no point because, like I said, never ever aim down sights with it. Also, on top of that, the magazine size is always 6, and you tear through that ammo super quickly. Scavenger is an absolute must, but we'll talk about that later. And finally, the reload speed is 2.1 seconds, and in fact, that reload speed is actually the worst characteristic on this weapon. It's the same reload speed as things like assault rifles, but overall, it's really not that bad of a a stat. It's just so happens to be the worst one out of everything we've talked about. Now, a couple other things you may want to know about this weapon is there is an arc and travel time to the bolt or the bullet, whatever you want to call it. This thing takes time to get to your target. So while this thing is flying through the air, the person you're shooting at could actually kill you before it hits them. So you can wind up with these weird case scenarios where the person you're shooting at, you and him actually kill each other, and it's very, very odd. Also, it arcs. It has a parabolic arc, so you kind of have to, if you're at a long distance, aim above the person you're shooting at, kind of like sniping in a game like Battlefield. So it takes a little bit to get used to with the travel time, because you got to lead your target, and if they're far away, you got to aim above them. So the aiming does take a little while to get used to. So this is where the stats end and where the best class setup kind of part begins. So starting off with attachments, because I truly believe that's the most important part. When you use this weapon with no attachment, so when you start out with this weapon, it's very difficult to use. It's hard to figure out how far to lead ahead of the person. It's not easy. Now, the next attachment you unlock is the bayonet, and all it does is help you out in close quarters combat, because sometimes when you get close with this thing, if the person knows how to strafe fire, it's really hard to hit them, so you're able to knife them. It's just like having a melee weapon out at the same time as your crossbow. So basically, a better melee weapon, because you can actually kill people out of range with it. After that, you unlock the tri-bolt. The tri-bolt, all it does is fire 3 bolts instead of 1. Now, this tears through your ammo super quickly, because remember, there is 3 bolts in a magazine, so therefore you only get 2 shots out of this thing. When you're using this thing like that, there's 2 ways to look at it. Either up close, you're using it like a shotgun, or at a range, you're going to be using it more liberally. And what I mean by that is, let's say you are shooting onto the B flag. Since there is 3 bolts shooting out of this weapon, you can actually kill 3 people with this. Now, since you're going through your ammo so fast, and since you're going to be using it really liberally, something like Scavenger is an absolute must when using Tri-Bolt. But the magic comes in where you can be way less accurate when using Tri-Bolt, because the bolts actually spread out, making the area of the one-hit kill much, much larger and much, much easier to use. So that's awesome. Now, it gets even better when we look at a Kimbo, because the way you're going to use this with a Kimbo, you first of all get more bullets. So you run through bullets super, super quickly with this thing, but you start with more bullets because you start with 2 weapons. In fact, you start with twice as many bullets. Also, on top of that, your fire rate can be twice as fast, because if you stagger your shots, you can do them so that it's a 400 RPM thing instead of a 200 RPM thing, because you can just do one shot, the other shot, one shot, the other shot. And then also, on top of that, since it's a 1 bullet kill, your reload times can be staggered, which means you will never not be able to fire, because you just have to hit 1 bolt to kill that person. Now, when you're using this thing with a Kimbo, you want to be super, super spammy. Just keep firing this thing. Use it almost like an SMG that's a one-hit kill. And I think it is, in fact, a little bit overpowered when using it with a Kimbo, simply because all the stats that are on the weapon are just like twice as good. You start with more ammo, your fire rate can be faster, it's easier to use because you can just keep on spamming. Imagine, though, being able to use Tri-Bolt and a Kimbo at the same time. It would be absolute nonsense, but it can't do that, thank God. Now, as far as perks go with this thing, I think there are 2 perks that are an absolute must. First of all, Scavenger. You run through ammo on this thing like there is no tomorrow. You must use Scavenger on this thing. And also the other one, since you are never aiming down sights, you don't have to use fast hands, but I think you do have to use Gung Ho. Gung Ho is very, very, very important with this weapon, and I improved the second I started using Gung Ho, so that's definitely a perk you're going to want to use. And finally, the last one I definitely recommend is something, or not something, like Ghost. Ghost itself, you need to use Ghost. Why? Because with this weapon, you're already staying off the radar, because like I said earlier, it basically has a built-in suppressor. Whenever you fire it, you never show up on the radar. So using Ghost in composition with that makes it so you're never showing up on the map, and when you're running around with this weapon, you're never seen. You're super sneaky, except for the really, really loud whistling noise for some reason. Now, finally, the last thing I'd like to talk about is specialist abilities. With this weapon, you're going to want to use a specialist ability, not a specialist weapon, because the time to kill on this thing is just as fast as any specialist weapon. If you're using something like the Sparrow, the time to kill on the ShadowClaw is exactly the same as that. If you're using the Annihilator, the ShadowClaw is the exact same time to kill as that. The only thing that's different is the way you get that time to kill. So there is no point in using that. So use a specialist ability, whether that be glitch, kinetic armor, something like that. That's what's going to make you better with this weapon. So, I hope this was informative. I hope you enjoyed the video. I tried to explain everything as fast as I could and the best I could. So, if you enjoyed and made it this far in the video, it'd be super greatly appreciated if you leave a like rating. You guys have been so supportive lately, so thank you so much. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. It would be really greatly appreciated. Check out my Twitch, Twitter down in the description. Thank you so much for watching. I love every single one of you, except for Brian. Brian's just that kind of guy who like goes to the bar with you, orders one beer, and then leaves early and makes all his friends pay for it. Fuck Brian. But until next time, guys, peace out.